Hey watch friends, today we're going to take a look at the latest offering from one of my absolute favorite brands. This is the Direnzo Eclipse version 2. This will be coming to their website on November 12th of 2022, and I'll of course have a link down in the description. Additionally, while we're going to look at this black version in detail today, indoor, outdoor, lume, all that good stuff, I will additionally have a follow-up video coming of the blue version, the light blue version or aqua version they have coming as well. So do stay tuned for that one if you care to see another colorway. That'll just be kind of a model revisit. First, being a version 2, I do want to mention this has changes throughout, as you would expect for a version 2. There's subtle changes to the mid case, there's amping up of the lume as well as the configuration. The bezel insert is going to be different on this. Same thing for the crystal is different as well. And then of course the color options, and there are some other minor changes as you go through it. Before we get into this though, I do want to cover administrative matters. This is a prototype that was loaned to the channel for review. However, if you notice that paid promotion banner up at the top, they do intend to send me a production version once it's available. So I want to be of course upfront about that. Before we dive into the watch, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the packaging. This Eclipse includes the excellent packaging we've seen on past Direnzos. You get a nice personalized postcard. Then you have the outer cardboard box, this is a trifold construction. You can see it does have a nice texture, and then their logo, magnetic closure for that. Pop that open, and then inside, we'll set that aside for the moment. You do have this book here, which gives you some basic information about the watch. You have this nice custom pin here, which is their logo. Really cool touch there. You have the warranty card, plastic, 2-year warranty, and then logo down at the bottom. Setting that aside, I've really liked these watch rolls. We've seen these in the past. You can kind of tie them up there, roll that open, and then this is the red variant. We've seen blue variants as well. Have the logo up at the top, and then down here you have 3 watch pouches. You've got the watch actually slid down into one with the keeper, and then in this case, this is the optional Tropic strap. And check that out as far as the pliability. I've seen other ones like this, but I have yet to see one that was as supple. Unfortunately, it does not include quick release spring bars, but overall very nice strap and definitely an option worth considering. Alright, now that we have a better feel for how this ships, let's dive deeper into this specific option. First, for warranty, this is coming with a 2-year standard warranty, as all Direnzos do. The case, measured on my calipers from the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, is coming in at 40.1 millimeters. The bezel kicks out slightly and comes in at 40.5 millimeters. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lugs to lug is coming in at 47.9 millimeters. The total thickness, including this crystal, is coming in at 12.3 millimeters. So pretty slim overall, and we'll talk about that further as we go throughout. As for the crystal, this is actually a flat but boxed edge sapphire crystal, which does include inner AR. And check that out, it sits just ever so slightly proud. The thing that's cool as we go through here is when you're looking at it head on, it almost just looks like a standard flat crystal. However, as you get out towards that edge, you do pick up just that subtle distortion, and I think this is excellently done. We'll explore it further why, but specifically sometimes you'll pick up a little bit too much edge distortion with these box edge crystals. However, this one, it's just right at the perimeter, and it gives that subtle effect that many of us like with that look, and additionally it does sit proud, which is nice there. But as far as the overall aesthetic, it doesn't really break up the legibility, and I don't think it's too in your face with the styling for that. As for the movement, this comes with a Sellita SW200-1, and it is the elaborate grade, and additionally it does have the Inca block shock resistance system built into it as well. The water resistance is coming at 200 meters or 20 atmospheres, so plenty versatile for all of your standard needs. As far as the weight, size to my 6.5-inch wrist on this bracelet, and we'll check out a strap option as well, this is coming in at 154 grams with the bracelet. As for the Tropic strap that we'll look at later on, that's optional strap, and that is coming in at 94.3 grams on the strap. And the head only, in case you want to try your own straps, is coming in at 77.6 grams. Alright, so now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the actual model itself. First, for the colors. There's of course the black version that we're looking at today. There's additionally a red version, which was a very popular one with the original Eclipse. There's a light blue or aqua version that we'll be looking at soon. There is a white version, as well as a meteorite limited edition version, which is reminiscent of the black but with a meteorite inlay in red accents. As far as the finishing of these, All of the standard dial configurations, the Meteorite of course does deviate slightly, but the standard dial configurations are going to have a nice deep matte in the middle. Then that goes out to a sunburst that really picks up an iridescence or pearlescence for the overall finishing for that. And of course that aligns with whatever color it is. But on this black version, it is a really nice, almost like brownish hue, just like we saw in the Solaris that we'll look at later on. As you move out, the bowl-shaped dial does curve up to the bezel insert, and that is going to be a nice polished ceramic that we'll look at further as well. One of the things that I've really noticed with this is this black version in particular is exceptionally in keeping with the namesake of the Eclipse. That matte dial really sucks you in the middle, but then having that iridescence that you get on the perimeter, specifically where that steps down and has that lip, it gets almost a subtle white kind of accent, just like when you see in Eclipse with just that little hint of light peeking out from the darkness. Really cool touch. Absolutely love that. We already talked about the fact that this does have their concave bowl shape, and that's one piece construction on the outer surface of that, and it just curves up into that rehaut or chapter ring, which is excellent looking there, and I love that touch. I've loved it on past Direnzos, and I love it here as well. The dial does have printing at the 12 o'clock position with their logo, the name Direnzo, and then Genevieve, and pardon my pronunciation there, below that. At the 6 o'clock position, you do just have 2 lines of text with Eclipse, and then the water resistance. Moving out to the perimeter, it does include hashes, and they actually do have accent colors as well for that in the 5-minute increments, and that gives you precision timekeeping for your minutes and your seconds. Additionally, it is important to note on the production version, because of that box edge, they'll actually be bringing those in a little bit further on the dial, or extending those a little further into the dial, so that way you won't have any of the concern that you sometimes get with distortion obscuring the legibility there with the box edge. At the 6 o'clock position on this particular variant, you do have a date window. However, they will be offering both date and no date variants, so whichever your preference is, you'll be well equipped. That date cutout, it is important to note, a really cool touch. It actually matches, if you notice, with the 6 o'clock marker that it sits right above, but additionally with their logo, they keep nice symmetry with that as far as the overall sizing for the cutout. As far as the hardware on this is what I would describe as being like an Aero handset for that. It does have a lollipop second hand, and there is going to be a nice polishing all the way around on all 3 of those hands. Shifting over to the markers are going to be at the 12 o'clock you have a triangle, then it shifts over for the majority of them to being a baton style, and then at the 3, 6, and 9 position, even with the date window, you do have circular markers that are included there as well, and that of course does carry through with the same polishing. Lume is going to be applied all the way around, and in this case we're looking at BGW9. Direnzo isn't generally known for having the strongest lume in the world, and certainly this is one that I wouldn't expect to win a lume war, but I found it to be plenty adequate. It doesn't have the deficiency that I think some of the earlier models did. They've really paid attention to amping that up, and I think this has performed nicely overall in regular usage, and I think is going to be satisfactory for virtually everyone. Shifting over to the bezel on this, with being a dive style configuration, is 120 click, and it's a unidirectional bezel. Let's go ahead and listen to that action. As you can hear, it does have a nice ratcheting mechanism for that. The bezel itself, I would say, is relatively stiff for the feel of it. However, it is not overly so. It's a nice precise movement and click as you go through. It has very little back play, but that being said, you have to manually force to get that back play for that, so I really don't think that that's anything as far as slop. You won't feel that in standard usage at all. And additionally, they did actually do the precision alignment based on that settling in of that. So you can either go 1 click short or just past and back play, and either way it lines up, so that's a perfect touch for that as well. As far as the texture, this has on the outer perimeter has a nice milled in coin edge, but you'll notice there's an undercut which almost gives like a skin diver kind of effect, and that does have a mirror finish to the undercut. So I think that's a really attractive look. It does reduce the surface area slightly, and it's not the easiest to grip a hold of. However, I have not had any issues get good traction from that bezel, and additionally I find there's plenty of real estate to grip a hold of that without having any appreciable issues. As far as the bezel insert, on this particular variant, you can see there is a highly polished and excellently finished polished ceramic bezel insert, but there's also going to be a stainless bezel insert option depending on which variant that you go with. As far as the marks on here, you might have noticed that with the exception of the 12 o'clock, they do reverse those of the dial markers. You can see baton to circle, and then circle to baton, which I think is a really cool touch. And it's one of those things that visually you don't necessarily notice right off the bat. However, I just think it adds to the cohesiveness of the design, and I think is very well selected there, as is typically the case for Direnzo. So I like that a lot. Shifting over to the case, this case looks at first glance almost as being like a slab case. However, it does have a very subtle, not a downturn curvature, but additionally it does protrude out slightly there. It does have at the top, you can see these nice gorgeously applied polished chamfers here, which that really helps to not only visually add appeal to that, but it does help to further slim down what is already very slim mid case. This overall shape here, with the downturned lugs coming almost directly in line with the case back, but then additionally that flowing profile, even though it looks like it is a little bit flat, I found that this just melts perfectly into the wrist, and we'll look at that wrist footage here shortly, but I really think this wears excellently. In many respects, it reminds me of what I enjoy so much about the Mondial, where this just sets down in and it almost just feels like it's a part of your wrist. You can't really see any division for that, and it just wears almost impossibly thin for that. I like that a lot. The finishing is very well applied. It is brushing as its predominant, as you can see here, and it runs the length of the case, where you looked at the polished accents that this has as well to kind of break things up, and that carries through, of course, to the top of the lugs. Shifting over to the 3 o'clock side, you can see that the crown is nested without having any crown guards, which I think keeps that sleek, classy appearance for this, even though it is a diver style watch. As far as the crown itself, this is coming in at 6.9 millimeters. It is a screw down configuration. As you can see, very nicely signed, and it does mix with having some polish as well as some bead blasting, even on the signature. So really nice little touches there. The milling perfectly matches the bezel. You can see this is a nice coin edge cut there. And again, just that cohesiveness that you get through Direnzo's, that's one of the things I love about the brand. The action is smooth on this, no issues whatsoever with the threading or otherwise. So I think that's really well done. Shifting over to the case back. The case back is a screw-in construction, as you'd expect for the style of watch. As far as the finishing, it is going to be principally brushed, but it does have a generous application of blasting as well, which really adds with those concentric circles. It adds a lot of a visual appeal. So even though this is generally going to be facing your wrist, very nice to flip this over and look at that as well. As far as the configuration for the screw-in, it does have, as we've seen on past Direnzo models, a keyhole kind of configuration there, which I think is just really a nice touch. Instead of having those semicircle cutouts on the outside, this makes for a smoother finish overall, but additionally visually, I just think it looks excellent. The text is cleanly milled as you go throughout the perimeter, and that's set against that blasting, and again, with applying a more of a sheen with the brushing to kind of contrast that as an offset. So excellently done there. Shifting over to the bracelet. The bracelet on this is tapered, coming from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. It does feature female end links, so you're going to get great drape over articulation as you drape it across your wrist. The links themselves it's going to be a 3-link or oyster type of configuration. The finishing is brushed all the way through. In the retention mechanism, these are held in with screws, which if you need a screwdriver, I will have one linked down the description. Nice and expensive Weir screwdriver. Makes that easy to not bugger these things up as you're changing it around. On the back, it does have quick release spring bars, so it makes it nice and easy to change those over to a strap of your choice if you choose not to run it on the bracelet. As for the clasp is an updated clasp style. It is, I think, a nice choice for this overall. It was one of my things on the Solaris, and we'll look at the one that I changed it over to. The Solaris I thought was a little bit chunky. This I think is actually pretty nice and slim overall. It is just a double pusher configuration. It is milled on the inside. As far as the outside, it keeps with the overall look of the watch. So you have your brushed finish applied there. You have your matching polished chamfers, your signature there as well. And then out on the side, you do have 5 micro adjust holes. As for that Tropic strap that we looked at earlier, the Tropic strap is an available option, and they will also have a leather option available too, if that's more of your speed. All right, so now that we have a better feel for the watch, let's go ahead and bring in some comps. First, naturally, I want to bring this in next to the Solaris that we've made reference to. So as you can see, size-wise and stylistically, there's certainly more present overall on the Eclipse than there is on the Solaris. As far as the coloration, I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell on camera or not, but there is a difference in the hue in the application of the gradient on the Eclipse versus the Solaris overall. But there are, of course, naturally similarities. In this, of course, was loosely based on the Eclipse as far as the configuration there, but you can see just the sizing, the scale, everything about it. They are certainly distinctive looking watches as well. Bringing in next, this is the DRZ04 or Mondial. And that gives you an idea here against that gray as far as the overall aesthetic as well as the sizing. I think sizing-wise, these are relatively comparable in visual appearance. Of course, it's always hard with a fixed bezel versus a dive-style bezel there. And then here we have next, this is a Zelos Mako titanium, and this is a 40 millimeter rather. 40 inch would be quite large. That being said, you can see these two are, I think, relatively comparable, a little more present as far as the dial on the Direnzo here. And then bringing in, this is a Weiss Hitman. This one comes in at 41 millimeters. I think they're actually relatively comparable. This, in many respects, I think is almost reminiscent of like a 42 as far as the visual appearance, despite the fact that it does wear on the wrist like a 40 millimeter would. But the main reason I want to bring these in, this is kind of a Black Bay homage here, and you can see that this is very reminiscent of that as far as the overall styling, though you can see this Eclipse, I think, is visually more slim for that, and despite the fact that this Weiss is excellently finished, I think the Direnzo is every bit as well finished, if not better finished, and has those little touches in attention to detail throughout that I really love. All right, so now we have a good idea of the watch overall and how it compares. Let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. First, for positives, this is, I think, an absolutely gorgeous design. Obviously, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. That's always the case. But it's hard to argue that this is just such a well thought out design as far as the little touches as you go throughout here. I mean, as you're looking through, you have just the textural difference where you almost have a textural gradient going from the matte to kind of the iridescent or pearlescent to the high polish. That, I think, is just a nice touch there. The layout, the configuration, the symmetry as far as the visual aspects and attributes of that are excellent. The concave dial, that's one of the things that I know many, like me, love that one-piece construction in that concave look. And then across the board, I just really don't think there's anything that you can complain about from the visual aspects, whether it's your style or not. The finishing, I think, for the money is excellent. And speaking of money, this is coming in at $680 at launch for the standard configurations or $890 for the Meteorite. So do, of course, jump on those. Those are converted to US dollars. I believe they're in Swiss francs, if I'm not mistaken, for that. But as far as the pricing for that, it might be slightly different, but that'll give you a ballpark there. As far as the finishing for that price, I think it easily is on par for that, if not upwards of $1,000 as far as its competition, as far as the aesthetics. We've already looked at the fact that this wears very thin. The mid case, everything about it just gives that very slim, svelte appearance, and I think that is excellent. Love the way it wears, love the way that the Mondial wore, and this reminds me a lot of that, despite the difference in the styling. As for some critiques, I just have some minor items, and they really stem primarily from the bracelet. First are the quick release spring bars. I'm very glad that they went ahead and decided to add quick release spring bars. I think that's a great touch, and I prefer that over drilled lug holes. However, these, it's kind of a pro and a con. You can see they just barely come above. I found they're a little bit hard to grip a hold of, and it's easy to slip off with your fingernails there. But the positive of that is they are nested so nicely. Some people complain about hot spots from those. You will not have that. At least I certainly have not had that with these, but it is a little bit harder to grip as a trade-off. As far as the clasp, while I do think it's a nice upgrade on the clasp, I've gotten spoiled with toolless micro-adjust clasps, and that's something I'd love to see carry over to here as well. And then finally, just a preference item. I am not necessarily a huge fan of the chunkier 3-link configuration or Oyster configuration. I think it works well with the overall vintage style of this watch. However, I can't help but feel like I personally would have preferred something like the H-link configuration, where you can see nice slim links by comparison as far as the length, not necessarily with the polishing on this variant. I don't think that would have suited it well, but kind of the H-link configuration there, I think could have worked well. Or something like a 5-link, or even possibly, I know that I said I'm not a big beads of rice guy, but possibly even going with like the beads of rice that's on the Solaris, though I do appreciate that they're trying to keep these as distinct models as well, and that's one of the things that sets it apart. That being said, again, that's just something that comes down to preference. Haven't really had any complaints with this. Despite the larger links, I do think the articulation is very solid. As you go through, it drapes well to the wrist. Really nothing to complain about there. Again, that's just a personal item. So very, very minor things overall. So where does that leave us? At the end of the day, I'm going to finish this video where I started. Direnzo is absolutely one of my favorite brands. And personally, as far as the designs go, they're designs that really speak to me across the lineup, and this one's no exception. I don't think that this is... Anybody who likes Direnzo style, I certainly don't think that this is one that's going to disappoint. They really nailed it on the execution. I think the price is reasonable for what you're getting, especially with the quality of the finishing and the overall aesthetic. And this is one that I'm absolutely looking forward to having in my collection. So there you have it. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did like this, as always, do tap that like button. And if you haven't done so already, do smash that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.